Good afternoon. Let's get started. Our speaker next week will be Richard Sears, who is a consulting professor in the Department of Energy Resources Engineering at Stanford University. Richard will talk to us about oil and gas and the future of energy. I've spoken with him, and he's really going to give us a very broad overview, drawing some links between the undercurrents of the specific industry, but also how that impacts the broader fabric of energy here in the US and globally more broadly. It's a great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today, Raiford Smith. Raiford is the Vice President for Corporate Development and Planning at CPS Energy, which is the utility down from here in San Antonio. Many of you might know that CPS is one of the largest municipally owned utilities with about 1 million electric and gas customers with over $2 billion in annual revenues and about $10 billion in assets. They really have been, as you will hear from Raiford, at the forefront of thinking about the next stage of where the electricity industry is going to be, and they're preparing to be there, and Raiford actually has been at the center at the utility in trying to lead some of those activities. Raiford has a very remarkable career, very impressive, 25 years of experience in a wide range of things in the energy industry. In terms of background, he has a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Science from University of Georgia, an MBA from University of Virginia, and JD from Charlotte School of Law. So you can see engineering, management, law, all coming into thinking about the evolution of the electricity industry. So a special pleasure to have you here, Raiford. He holds several patents in grid optimization, electric grid technologies, and so on, has written several papers in this area, and also serves on the advisory boards of ABB, Enernoc, and Nest Labs. Please join me in welcoming Raiford.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and good evening to all of you. I'm going to talk about what's been happening to the utility industry and how we are transforming. But one of the things I like to do is encourage questions, so feel free to ask as I go along questions that you may have that may be of interest to you, or in case I happen to mispronounce something or do something goofy. That being said, a bit about CPS Energy. The key thing I think I would like to add to the introductory remarks is that CPS Energy, in addition to just being a utility, also happens to be number one in Texas for demand response capability, number one in Texas for solar, and number 7 nationally. So often those things get overlooked. And at the same time, though, we have some of the lowest bills for customers. So we've been able to have this giant transformative effect and still keep costs reasonable for our customers. That is no easy task. Also, a bit of background before we really jump into what we're thinking and why we're thinking it is just to give you a bit of a framework for thinking about strategy, which is to say that strategies themselves really depend on the time frame in which you're thinking about things. You can look at things that are mature and relevant today. You can look at things that are emerging for tomorrow, or you can look at the embryonic capabilities that are off into the future. A lot of my talk today is really going to focus in realms 1 and 2, primarily because those are the issues that are most pertinent to us, most relevant, and most easy to describe. The embryonic stuff is really neat, but the models, the economics, even the engineering isn't necessarily as fleshed out to really do too much with today. So that being said, I want to start by just talking about these 4 major megatrends that are affecting our industry and how what that ultimate effect has been. And the first one, I think, will be no surprise to anyone, which is distributed energy resources. These are things like batteries, photovoltaics, smart thermostats, you name it. These sorts of things are creating a need for the utility to find new ways to get data, to optimize, to run its system differently. But doing that effectively means that the first thing I have to do in response is to build a digital infrastructure. And that really follows Moore's law, which basically talks about not just the cost and computing ability, but for us, it's transforming what has been a very analog system into now a digital system. In many industries, that has happened 20, 30 years ago. For us, it is just happening right now. But once we have those things that create data, you've got to take the data to where it's useful, which means that the next major trend that's affecting us is Metcalfe's law, which states that the value of the network is essentially proportional to the number of commonly communicating devices. So all these things that have brains now are talking together, and as they start to do that, the more of them you have, whether they're customer-owned, utility-owned, or a combination therein, you've effectively got a far smarter and more digital infrastructure. Many people refer to this as IoT, right? The Internet of Things. And that's effectively what the three of these things, when you put them together, create for us, is the Internet of Things for the utility industry. The last one that's most important is you generate the data, you move the data around, but then what do you do with the data? And that effectively is the fourth and most major trend, which is big data analytics. Traditionally, utilities have not been able to look at anything other than perhaps hourly data, monthly data, annualized data. Now you're talking about data in the order of seconds or milliseconds, and this is an enormously different amount of data, and it's also a new way to look at things that perhaps the nuggets of value were not so easily observable to us. If you put all four of these things together, though, you create something new, which is that customers now have choice, and the utility business model that we have had for basically since the industry began now must evolve. And as an attorney, I'll tell you, the first round of deregulation was heavily predicated on attorneys and economists arguing about what the market at a wholesale level will do. With all of these smart devices, all of these distributed energy resources, all of this technology, what's effectively happening is that now consumers can choose who provides them power and how that power is delivered. And that means consumer choice on a level that no attorney, no economist initially could foresee. And for us as an industry, we need to find ways to be relevant in that conversation, as well as how do we provide new value-added products and services to customers in light of their changing expectations. There's a couple of problems with that, though. And the first one is this simple marketing concept, which is that the share of consumer wallet is really basically a proxy for the relevance of that thing to the consumer. So on average, what do you think the average household, family of four in the United States, spends as a percent of their income on energy? 3%. 3%. Anyone else? 1%. Okay, well, you're all going in the right direction. It is 3%. 3% is exactly it. So the product I make, that my utility does today, we are 3% relevant to the consumer. So let's think now, that energy goes to the consumer and the consumer does something with it. What do you think the share of wallet, the average percentage of income that gets spent on the things that consume energy is? 30, yeah. So it's 31%. Someone has cheated and seen my slides. I'm going to have to check that out. But yeah, so the whole point is that what we see is that companies like Google, Time Warner, Solar City, AT&T, Verizon are 10 times more relevant to the average family of four in the United States than their electric utility and their electric and gas utility. To some degree, we are victims of our own success. We have spent so much time from when the industry began to now trying to cut costs as much as possible and provide reliable power that we are now a tiny fraction of the value chain for the consumer. There's a good and a bad to that. It's good for the consumer. As the utility, I've been commoditized. I have to figure out how to get out of this mess. How do I find a way to add value to the consumer? How do I give them something they want? Clearly, I cannot turn myself into Google, and I have no intention of doing so. But what can I offer them? What can I provide that gives them more value, but at the same time still stays within my core? That's the conundrum that every utility right now is facing. Right? They're trying to figure out how to be more relevant to the consumer, how to give them products and services, how to design their infrastructure so that it meets their need and be relevant, when all the technology is essentially making them largely irrelevant. So that 10x difference is on a lot of utilities' minds. They're all worried about it. There's one other big problem, which is the way our costs are recovered. So if you think about the average utility in the United States, roughly 30% of the cost is variable, and 70% of it is fixed. So those power lines, the poles, the wires, the transformers, the power plants, 70% of our cost. The fuel that goes into it and the labor that does everything, 30%. That means that as production changes, right, I'm only having about a 30% change in my actual cost structure. How we get recovery for those costs, how customers pay us for that, though, is the exact opposite. 92% of our costs are recovered through a variable charge, and only 8% thereabout are recovered through a fixed charge. So what that means is that as we see consumers adopting things that effectively decrease their consumption, the utility isn't just getting a lower variable cost, lower fuel, lower O&M associated with their assets, but that's eating directly into the cost recovery for the assets themselves, assets that take 30 to 50 years to pay off. Most people think, why do I care? Well, I'll tell you, the banks care a lot, the banks that loaned us the money. The utilities were set up and designed to be effectively pool money together and pay off assets over very long periods of time because our industry is very risky. This conundrum between how our costs are recovered and how they are actually incurred is a huge problem for us. We have to figure out how to be relevant to the consumer and fix how we price our product. This is an enormous issue for us. At the same time, all of our technology is changing. Well, another thing that I hear as an issue a lot is people keep talking about being off-grid. They want to be off-grid. Well, I think, first off, that goes against Metcalfe's law, right? That's like saying, I don't want to be in Facebook. I think LinkedIn is a total waste of time. I think my cell phone is a piece of junk. Well, okay, I don't have an iPhone, so maybe it is a piece of junk. But the point is that being connected actually has lots of inherent value. And so often when I hear people say that, I think what I'm really hearing isn't so much that they don't want to be connected to other people, because frankly that's what enables the ability to sell the excess power when you've got too much, or to buy it when you don't have enough. What I hear from them, though, is I want choice. I want control. Right? That's effectively what the consumer is telling me. They're telling me, I don't like the control that I have today, and I want more tomorrow. So, okay, I'm caught between all my assets are too old and they're not doing the right things. I need to change out the technology. I'm not relevant to the consumer. My cost recovery mechanisms are totally out of whack with my costs, my pricing. And what my consumer most wants is control over the thing I do. This is the problem in a nutshell for utilities. We are in a very interesting and sometimes painful place for us. How do we find value here? How do we survive? How do we evolve? Well, the first thing is to understand what your beliefs are about this. And that first is that we believe, and this is a lot of very small writing, there will be a quiz afterwards. But the big belief is that generally that the grid itself is the value driver for the utility. The connectivity for consumers to each other, to generation, to all sorts of resources, that is the primary driver of value for utilities going forward. In the past, it was building a big power plant. That was the primary driver. Now, the grid, the connectivity is the primary value driver. The second one is that the Internet of Things, that connectivity, that use of data, everything talking to one another is the biggest driver of that change on us. And then, of course, in terms of that, we believe that our regulatory model, our capital structure, et cetera, must evolve. It has to change so that we, as a business, as an industry, continue to provide the electricity and that connectivity to customers. And we think that these sorts of things will happen. That being said, CPS Energy has adopted an overarching digital transformation strategy, and it's pretty straightforward. And because I have a 6-year-old daughter who loves Legos, I thought I would use a Lego analogy for all of this. Oh, and she only likes pinks and pastels, so I picked pinks and pastels in honor of my daughter. The first is that we would build a digital, densely sensored infrastructure to help generate the data and the control needed for all the sorts of new capabilities that we're looking for. We cannot rely on analog assets and human-in-the-loop sorts of situations. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and visited a utility and I said, hey, by the way, how do you switch power between this circuit and that circuit? And they say, well, I get a guy out there and he's got a big long pole and he hooks it up to this thing and he yanks it really hard. That's how we've done it for almost 100 years. Okay, we need a digital version of that, and we have them, and we are adopting them. But that's the sort of transformation we're going from. If you can imagine all the old ways of doing it, completely revamping it. If you do it with this digital infrastructure, you're effectively creating the data and the control capabilities you need. But having data and having control capabilities is not enough. It is simply the foundational piece you need to start with. The second piece is to be able to make your data easily usable wherever and whenever you need it. After all, analytics is not predicated on having everything brought back to a central point, having a decision made and then send it out. That is how the utility has been problem solving since time immemorial. The problem with that is that the problems become too complicated to resolve by having all the data come back to a centralized point. And the need for which to speed that computational algorithm through, I have to put it very close to the edge of where the issue is so that that problem can resolve quickly. If I don't solve that problem within seconds or milliseconds, I will miss the opportunity, I will create a failure on the grid, there will be problems. So what you're seeing is a migration away from very centralized simple computing to now distributed computing throughout the grid. If any of you, I'm sure there are several computer science majors in here, the whole premise of the internet itself, right, was predicated on the belief that distributing computing power was not only better, but it was far more resilient. So the third aspect for us is not just making the data available, but also making the infrastructure far more resilient than it is today. So often what we have is security through obscurity, which is to say that no one knows what the heck that protocol is and no one knows what that data structure is. What we've tried to do, though, is because all that data is very obscure and it goes back to this centralized point, we've created what I love to tell our cybersecurity folks is our single point of failure for the entire grid. This is clearly not a good design, but it is so much about how we have designed our systems today. Even the word SCADA, if you've heard of this, it stands for basically being able to centralize your automated data collection, right? And pull it into a single point. This is very bad. What we are trying to do, though, is distribute the computing, distribute the use of data, and distribute the security, right? Doing that radically transforms what your infrastructure is capable of doing, and it gives you innate capabilities that, are, I think, largely commonplace in other industries, but for the utility industry is radically new. Having done this, having been able to get the data plane set up, to federate the data where needed, to secure it in the right way, though, still there's one key component missing, which is using that data for something, right? And doing that, being able to manage your data, develop the analytics, gives you the ability to have insights into your consumers, to build products and services, and create better capabilities than you have today. This truly is where the value is created. You have to do all the other predicate pieces to be able to get to this, but this is the value driver for the utility. This is how we stay relevant. This is how we continue to drive our costs down and provide additional capabilities for consumers. Well, having said that, that's really nice theory, and it's great on a PowerPoint slide, but let's talk about the practical reality of implementing it. So first, we're going to talk a bit about analytics. We're going to start at the top and work our way back down again. And I thought I would use this car analogy, one, because my wife loves it, and it's very easy for me to explain, and two, because I get to show a cool guy in an island t-shirt here because I think it's fun. The first thing is, when we think about analytics, at least at a utility, the first thing is we think about the fuel, right? This is the data warehouse, and what are we looking at? And so often we see within the utility is that Not only is our utility set up in silos, but the data is also in silos. In fact, many, many, many silos. It's all over the place. It's in a really bad shape. Nobody can make heads or tails of it. And that's our first problem, which is just getting the data, figuring out what to do with it. The second aspect of it is once you do have the fuel to make the car go, it's feeding it to the engine itself. And that for us is our analytics platform, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. And it's really guiding us on where we should go. So often people think of analytics as reporting. To me, that's if I were driving my car in reverse, right? I'm looking backwards. Analytics itself is strategy, right? It's synonymous, to me at least, with strategy. Where should we be going? What will happen? Will we hit a pothole? Will there be a speed bump? Will it be an express lane and I can go 80 miles an hour? I don't know, right? If I'm always looking in the reverse, I don't know. Analytics helps us see forward and tries to tell us what's coming. But analytics is only as good as also the reporting aspect of it. And reporting is, so often we have fuel and then we go straight to reporting. And we skip the engine. And so for us, we are focusing a lot on the analytics piece, but we certainly have that. But the most important piece out of all of this, the key component for us, and the part we lack the most in, is the person themselves, the human capital. You're talking about an industry where most people, like I said, think of utility analytics as reporting. They don't think of it as R or Python or Java or any of these things. They think I'm talking about some sort of zoological experiment. It is not a zoological experiment. Neither is a geek fest here. This is not something that's far out rocket science. It's just how do we help them understand what these capabilities are and what they can do with it. And so for us, we've tried to put together a strategy that addresses all of these major components. With that, though, now a bit about the actual architecture. In doing it, we've divided the universe within our infrastructure in development and production. And that was really important because traditionally utilities, everything is production. And therefore, everything is sacrosanct. Nothing can be touched. Stay away from my data. Stay away from my systems. You'll mess them up. And so we have this very, very, very traditional thing where assets produce data and are siloed and brought into our systems one way. And then maybe we have some business reporting tools that are attached to an enterprise bus. This is really a bad way to do things. And the primary reason for that is what I call the curse of the use case, which is to say somebody had a bright idea to solve a problem. I don't know, whatever it is, right? Outage management. I want to know where power is out, and I want to tell people about that, right? Sounds like a good thing, right? And so the way they did that was they would rely on telephone calls. People would call up, and they would plot it on the map, and then they would guess. Oop, looks like these people are out. Tomorrow, though, yesterday, whatever, I came up at some future date with the idea of using the data from the meters themselves to tell me, am I out or am I on, right? Oh, I have a slight problem. The system I built was predicated on those phone calls and a collection of data from the call center, not on getting meter data. And so now I've broken my infrastructure and I have to rebuild it from the ground up. This happens to us time and time again. It means that our infrastructure is, politely, brittle. So what's the first way for us to solve that? It's to use a thing called the Open Field Message Bus. What this does is it allows us to federate the data the moment it touches our network so that now, instead of having the asset hard-coded into the system that uses the data, I now have created a logical bus at the edge of my network so that anything can connect anywhere to use the data. This is really important. Without this step, I cannot put analytics anywhere I want. I am restricted only to using it in my data center, and as we mentioned earlier, what's happening in our infrastructure requires us to put analytics closer and closer to the end customer. The second thing that we run into with this is that, okay, so we federated the data, now what are we going to do with it? And so we have installed, for us, we've installed an Apache Hadoop system. What this gives us is the ability to manipulate the data and to store and create a data lake. This data lake consists of around 12 to 14 terabytes of data and represents everything that happened at the utility for the last 2 years. Not everything that happened in this siloed business unit or in this particular function, but everything that happened in the utility over the last 2 years. Now that sounds really great. I'd love for some of you to actually see the data at some point. I know at least one of you will. And when you do, what you'll find is that the data is a mess. But at least we have it in one spot, right? At least that's the starting point. Having done that, though, we are also doing some external data enrichment because there are plenty of things we don't know about our customers or about our systems, and we have to buy that from elsewhere to enrich it and make it better. And then we use very common analytics tools, R, SAS, Python, C#. These are all very well-known tools. We have what I like to refer to as an architecturally specific vendor-neutral implementation for analytics. This allows us to find great young minds like yours who perhaps are trained on SPS, whatever, right? Very common tools, and you can easily plug into what we're trying to do. If I look for a proprietary solution that's specific to the utility industry, I'm talking about a human capital pool of 5 people. Why would I do that when I can find somebody from many other industries who can be trained already on those tools that I can bring in very quickly and get them up to speed on what we do? And they already have the right understanding of the tools and the capabilities and what needs to be done. And then one last important step, which is we're doing all this in development, but having a very visible and a noticeable step of moving those capabilities into production. Most people think that when they build a tool, they build the analytics, and they're done. Yeah, that's really not the hard part. The hard part is convincing the business unit to understand what the thing looks like and who has to do what and thinking about the next steps. This is really the challenge and the change management issue for us. So right now we have use cases across our entire company that we are doing all this work in. It is by far a giant change management exercise. And it's as much risk mitigation as it is a value creator for us. And the best thing about it is that innovation and being innovative attracts other innovators and better outcomes and better human capital. And so for us, this isn't just about having some cool tools. This is about how do we literally transform everything that we do by bringing other partners, other capabilities, other people into the mix that normally would not think about setting foot in a utility. The second thing, as we work our way down, and this is going to talk about security, data federation, and the assets, the digital assets themselves, is our microgrid. Now, microgrids are not necessarily a new thing. Microgrids have been around for a while. Our microgrid, however, is very different. Most microgrids, as you will find if you ever see one, is that they are a custom engineered solution, meaning that what we had to do was understand exactly what that building or facility needed. We would build exactly the right generating units and build a whole bunch of very, very customized things to operate that system because it is in itself a small grid. This is really expensive, and this is really not the right way to do it. If you think that this is a capability that customers will want, and you need to find a way to wash, rinse, repeat, and do it again and again and again, but make it cost-effective for the consumer. So what we did was we are building, along with another utility, we are both building microgrids that use entirely different vendor equipment, but uses that OpenFMB technology. And that OpenFMB technology, it's open source, it's freely available, and it allows us to federate the data from all these different vendors and apply common logic to 2 different microgrids that look very different from one another. This means that the cost to build and implement the infrastructure is significantly lower than if we had done a custom design each time. So what you see is more commoditization of the microgrid itself, which is exactly what needs to happen if we're thinking that consumers want to find ways to subdivide the grid into different components, and that is what we should be delivering to them. So we're building one in San Antonio on Joint Base San Antonio. If you ever are down in that area and you'd like to come see it, as soon as we get it finished here in a few months, happy to bring people by and take a look at it. But it is truly more of what I would call a plug-and-play microgrid and less of a custom engineered job. This is truly a really interesting project for us, and certainly with our partner utility and another vendor that are working on it with us. But doing all this, this is all really good, but there's one other key thing we haven't talked about, and that's products and services. And so what I'd like to do is draw your attention to our new solar offerings as a way to demonstrate how this digital strategy is really playing out for us. So most people think about solar and they think of things, they hear, oh, it's expensive, right? Or, oh, it creates problems for the utility or whatever, right? It's got a whole bunch of hype around it. But we really looked at the data and we found out that there were two different barriers for customer adoption. The first one is the roof itself. Do I own it? Is it mine? Is it of the right quality? Is it facing the right way? Is it shaded? Or does it have, like what I refer to with my wife, does it fail the spouse test because she says it's ugly, right? One reason or another, the roof itself often is a barrier to adoption. The second barrier to adoption, and by far the larger of the two, is the money itself. How do I pay for it, right? Solar is not cheap. And we looked at those two things, and we have two new programs to fix that. First one is a community solar program that allows customers to buy into solar who don't necessarily own their roof or have the wrong orientation. But by far the more interesting one is this one, Solar Host. And what it does is it allows me to give the customer solar for free. No strings attached, no you owe me a lease payment for 20 years or here's a loan. I'm giving it to you for free. And, because I always like the sweeteners, I'll pay you 3 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt that's produced as a rental fee. Keep it up there for 20 years. So you get it for free, and I pay you a rental fee. So the finance folks in the rooms will say, wow, that's an infinite return, and I make my money back immediately, right, because I didn't put any money into it. Sounds like a pretty good deal, huh? All right, so for 98% of the population who have the problem with a money issue, that's enough to get them sold. Interestingly enough, though, 2% of the population that can afford to do solar today, though, that does not sell them. They still want to own it. And so what I'm trying to do is find a better value proposition, better product, right? So what sells it on them are the other attributes of the product, which is this. Not only will I put it on your roof, and will I pay you 3 cents per kilowatt hour to have it hosted, I'll maintain it. And not only will I maintain it, when the inverter goes bad after 10 years, I'll replace it. Oh, and by the way, your roof is probably going to need to be re-roofed at about 12 years in. I'll pay to take it down and put it back up after you re-roof your roof. This sort of capability, oh, and I'll insure it too. Hail comes along, whatever, gets damaged. Take care of all that for you. What this has done is, amazingly, what we're selling to those consumers is convenience. 98% of the population, it's about how do you make it affordable. 2% of the population, it's about how do you make it convenient, because I can already afford it. And in doing this, we have radically transformed how solar is utilized in San Antonio, and hopefully everywhere else. But frankly, we didn't stop there. We also have rights to the inverter. And the inverter is a key component to that solar installation, right? It's not just enough to produce DC power, you have to convert it into AC, which is what the grid and everything else uses. And so that inverter, though, all of them today that are primarily sold, they all act in unison. And you can think of it like having a big bully push the grid around. You get too much of it, and basically these things start to mess with the grid and its performance. We, as the utility, since these are our solar panels, we have rights to the inverter. So now I have the ability to mitigate that. Not only do I have the ability to mitigate that, we're implementing tools to essentially bundle all of this up as a resource, right? So now, instead of thinking of it as, oh my gosh, here's this thing and I got to deal with it, now it becomes potentially a monetizable asset, right? And that changes the paradigm for the utility significantly. Additionally, for the utility, you look at natural gas prices. How many people think natural gas prices are going down further from where they are today? Show of hands. All right. Oh, one guy. All right. How many people think that natural gas prices are going up from where they are today? All right. Sorry, you're out. You overruled everybody. All right. So yeah, we see the same thing, right? We see that the forward curve for natural gas is what we call it's in contango. It means that it's going up like this. And not only is it going up like this, but it's going up and it's much more volatile. Right? So it widens out significantly. So as you think about that, that's what's on the margin here in ERCOT in Texas, right? That's the marginal price for electricity. So not only is it going up, it's also getting more volatile in the future. How do I hedge against that? So what I have done is every time I get customers to sign up for this, I have done a fixed for float swap, meaning I have swapped that forward floating, volatile, rising price for a fixed 20-year 3 cents, which is right now some of the lowest gas prices ever seen, I am locking in that customer at that avoided cost for 20 years. So I get that benefit. I get the benefit of it being a biddable resource. I get the benefit of also avoiding the lost fixed cost recovery issue, meaning this customer under normal situations would be putting this on, net metering it, and I would be losing money that basically would compound and grow worse and worse and worse for me for 20 years. That is a really bad day for me because now I still have to recover those costs. I have those, they come due. I now have to go charge all the other people who don't have solar. And that creates this very funky cost shift that isn't very equitable. It isn't to say that it's bad, it's just the way the system works. And what we have to do is find ways creatively to get around it. What this program does is it allows us to get around those problems operationally, financially, and from a customer offer perspective. This is really the pinnacle of our use of data, a digital infrastructure, securing data, federating it, etc., together. Because to do this, we first had to figure out what did we have? What was the data? How did we get it? Do we need more data? Once we had that, then how do we get it so that we can use it? And then in doing that, figuring out what did the customer want? What were their value drivers? What's the right product structure to put together? Put it all together in a package and deliver it. That's what this does. This is, to me, the future of how utilities will look at problem solving. Let's not just solve the instant issue. Let's think strategically about how we fix many other things. Let's bring in an ecosystem. We did a purchase power agreement for this. We don't have solar installers that work for us. Right? I got companies to bid on it, and instead of doing it like most people buy a 5 kW system, right? It's a really small system, right? Now we're doing what Solar City's doing. I'm bidding 10 megawatts. I'm doing giant systems, right? So we get cost effectiveness scale there that you wouldn't get when you're buying it on a one-off basis. So we save the consumer money. We save us money. We get everybody an effective deal. We QA/QC every installation. There is no, fly-by-night installation that's going to come in and take off and put something on there. What this does, it allows us to make sure the consumer has a much better experience. And best of all, it democratizes solar. It takes it away from the 2% of the population who can afford it and it gives it to all 100%. Right? I mean, it isn't, at the end of the day, isn't that what we would really want, right? We really want to find a way to make everybody valuable and put it together in an interesting way that everybody benefits from. So roofless solar, and I know it's a bit of a come down after talking about the solar host program, but roofless solar, 5 minutes, thanks. Roofless solar allows us to do community solar, and it's very traditional. You can buy in, you can own the panel, you can even name the panel. I'm tempted to go buy one and name it Bob just because. But it gives customers a way who have that roof issue, it gives them a way to participate also. So we're not going to leave anyone out of the opportunity to participate in these sorts of capabilities. Key thing about the response to these programs. So we launched the program, and in 72 hours, we had more people sign up for it than had signed up for the previous net metering model over 7 years. 72 hours versus 7 years. There was a write-up, social media, they were saying, CPS Energy has become the Uber of solar installers. I thought, wow. That's probably the first and only time a utility will be compared to a technology company, if not used in a disparaging way. So we have 10 megawatts that went into our initial program. That's pretty big, right? We have 150, actually the updated number is 173 megawatts of demand, consumer demand behind that. And I'll tell you, inside the utility, they all went, oh my God, what are we going to do? I said, wait, hold on. This is what we want. This is Apple, right? Apple has, they were like, I'm sorry, there's only so many iPhones, right? And, this is the position we want to be in. We want to create a product that has so much demand that we can't keep up with it, right? That's where the utility has really turned the corner and said, oh, okay, now I'm really part of the value equation. I'm really giving my customers something they want. I said, guys, don't be discouraged. Be excited. You've created something that they really want, right? And you need to really move with it and help offer more of it. So with that, that concludes the talk. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about any of these particular topics or even random questions about the utility industry or CPS Energy in specific. I thank you all very much for your time and attention and for inviting me here today to speak with you. Thank you.
Flip them around. Hello. I really like this host roof idea, and I was wondering if you've seen other utilities adopting this, or are you the first company to kind of go and do this, and how has it worked in other places? How has it worked with you?
Sure. So good news, bad news story. So the good news is there are two other utilities that are trying something very much like this. They've gotten maybe 10 customers to sign up for it. Yeah, so what's the big difference? All right, well, what happened? The way they're doing their model is they are trying to specifically limit the geographic distribution of the program to certain areas. We said, hey, this is a program for everybody. Come one, come all. And as a matter of fact, we did a whole bunch of open houses. I remember our first customer was in a low-income area of San Antonio. I went out there to meet her. She cried. She gave us all tamales. She blessed the solar panels, gave everybody hugs, including random strangers walking by, stopped all the children, like, this is a solar panel. Most people slowed down their cars. They were like, I had one guy roll down me, he's like, what is that? To me, that was incredible. That's why I grew up in a trailer park. And the thing that happened to us was our power got cut off all the time. We had never had enough money for it. This was a single mom. She had put both daughters through college, working 2 jobs, right? This is why she was so profoundly affected by this program. The traditional low-income assistance program is $10 off on your bill, just $10. This program for the average size home will give you $30 off. So you can do something great. You can have the solar panels, and you get 3 times the benefit. And you don't have to feel at the end of the day that somehow you're getting a handout or somehow this has got some social stigma to it. It's a cool solar panel. You get that on your roof. To me, that's the kind of thing that dramatically transforms your engagement with the consumer. That lady told me, we thought that you all had forgotten us. We are so glad to see you here. I'll tell you, another customer we had was Senator Phil Gramm. I don't know if you all remember Senator Phil Gramm. He lives on a modest 200-acre home out in Helotes. Homes, I should say, they're actually multiple buildings. Okay, if I can get the most conservative of conservatives and tell him about, here's the value of the program, here's why we do it, and get him on, and I can get a lady in one of the more underprivileged areas of San Antonio, I think we've got a product that really works for people across a wide spectrum. Other utilities they're infamous for saying, I'm right behind you. Literally, I'm right behind you. Good luck. And they are slow to adoption. And they want to see somebody else hit it out of the park first. And so right now we are, I think, carrying the water for a lot of the success factors. But I think once we see a year or so of success with it, you'll find a lot of other utilities wanting to jump into the pool and try it themselves.
Thanks for your talk. My question is also concerning the rooftop solar. I'm just hoping that you could speak to whenever the people are ready to sell their homes and the system is actually, still standing. I'm just hoping you could speak to that.
Sure. So it was really interesting. We had a lot of questions around that. People were concerned. So we did an interesting thing because we were worried that maybe a customer would say, I got to sell my home and the new buyer doesn't want this. Get it off, right? And so what we have in the provision is that because this is a power plant to me, right? This is like I went and sited a combustion turbine or a combined cycle somewhere, and the landowner said, yeah, I realize I'm leasing you the land, but I don't want it there, right? So there is a financial penalty you have to pay because I have to come over there and get it. But what we did was the site for our community solar, where we're putting that in, where it's already ready for large-scale solar, is also our risk mitigant, right? Because if you don't want it on your roof, guess where I go put it? I put it there, right? So essentially the two programs balance each other out from a risk perspective and give you the ability to hedge out the risk of the consumer saying, I just, solar's ugly, get it off. I don't like having the $30 bill, credit a month. So that's how we've managed that. I think it's a kind of a unique way to get both problems solved and still give the consumer the ability to opt out if they want it.
Hi, and quick follow-up on the same topic. What are some of the most promising ways you think about monetizing the rights to the inverter in a program like Solar Host?
Sure. So one of the biggest problems that the utility industry has, and I'll confess we did this wrong, was their purchase power agreements, their agreements with the developers to build these sorts of capabilities. is they do the contracts on a dollar per kilowatt hour basis, meaning for every kilowatt hour that thing produces, I will pay you X. And life was good. But now that I have rights over the inverter, for those of you who are electrical engineers in the audience, know that I can monkey with how much kilowatt hours come out of that system. Right? If I'm fooling with it, I can make it go down. Right? And so suddenly to the developer, my cash flow does not look the same if Raiford is over there monkeying with my system. And so what we had to do was come up with a way to pay them either on a per kVA basis or on a per kilowatt hour basis. So if I'm monkeying with the inverter, I would pay them basically the equivalent cash flow if I hadn't monkeyed with it on a per kWh basis. So what we've done is we've modified our contract. Like I said, we did it wrong the first time. We've modified our contract to have that. That lets the developer and the homeowner say, okay, you go have fun, right? For us then, the way to monetize it is to figure out the rules in ERCOT. Because to be honest, if the market itself doesn't let you use this as a resource, then at least one of those value streams I mentioned will be taken away. And so right now we're trying to work on our policy side with ERCOT to say, hey, I've got a lot of demand response, which gives me capacity and energy. I'm about to have a lot of smart inverter capability here too. What's that worth to you? You know, how can we play in that space and effectively give you this capability that normally I wouldn't be able to do? I'll tell you, that is those discussions are still in the early stages. To me, though, that's where the promising opportunity lies. If we can unlock that, I think what you'll see is not only will we be able to monetize it, but you'll see inverter manufacturers themselves stop creating technology that does the things it does today, which is act badly, right? Because they'll want people to use that, and the market will demand it. I don't want that stuff that can't be monetized. I want this one, right? That's what I want to do. I want to create the market incentive to drive them to do the right things, and I think that's where that policy discussion will go.
Hey, your idea is good. So if there is have you considered the possibility that every customer has a PV, or are you going to limit the limit of customers having it?
I have been asked by numerous utilities, okay, great, tell me on your map, where are you going to tell people no, right? And I'll tell you, that goes against the model that I just laid out. My model is not to tell people no. My model is to figure out how to tell them yes, no matter what it is. After all, if we remember our cell phones, right? My cell phone does not go dead when lots of people talk. Well, actually it does. But the point is that it's not Verizon or whomever telling me, sorry, there are too many people talking right now. Please don't talk. They're like, oh my gosh, we need some more towers. We need some more capability. Right? And the technology itself is smart enough to go, wow, I need to start to reroute traffic. I need to bring on additional resources. The utility industry, as it goes from analog to digital, will gain that capability. Today, much of it is very, very fixed and static. What we're trying to do is evolve into that so that I can manage my infrastructure to meet the customer needs and not tell them no, but tell them, yeah, how much do you want? You want more? Great, here's some more. Right? I want them to have that capability. And if on the other hand they're like, I don't want it anymore, great. I can take it back, and I can do it in the most efficient and economic manner. How I've got it now, it's one size fits all, everybody gets the same, and that's not good for the consumer nor for me.
My question is on demand management. So you talked a little bit about analytics, and there's companies out there like OPower and STEM that are doing analytics, comparing things like household energy usage to your neighbors and trying to minimize that. Has your utility done any of that, and how do you see that moving forward in the future?
Sure. So we are an OPower customer. I'm on the board with Internoc, another company that does that. I just joined the Intel board. Google Nest. I know a lot of companies in that space. Everybody's doing it. I'll tell you, there's one funny thing, though, about comparing your usage to your neighbor. I'd like to do a little test with y'all. Okay, so how many people here own versus rent? Owners? Okay, renters. Okay, just think now for a moment. No, you don't have to shout out or anything. For those of you who are owners, think of what your monthly house payment is. Okay, for those of you who are renters, think about what your monthly rental payment is. Some of you are paying more than somebody else, right? If I ask you all to compare your numbers, some of you are going to feel pretty pissed off, right? Because you're going to think, holy mackerel, I am paying way too much for this. Or, I am doing awesome, right? That's the whole thing about guilt. Do you think 10 years from now anyone will care? Will you? Funny thing about behavior-based stuff, it changes, right? Changes over time. The problem with doing behavior-based energy things is I can come over to your house and I can shame you. You know, you really shouldn't be running that water heater. That TV's been on way too long. Your air conditioner is just, I mean, talk about hog. Yeah, and maybe while I'm there harping at you about it, it's annoying. And you're going, wow, ooh, I'm feeling kind of bad. But over the long run, if I stop coming over to your house and harassing you about it, you stop caring about it. What I want to do, and I was telling the Google guys this yesterday at lunch with them, is I want to understand each customer's utility function. I want to know what level of comfort and convenience do you want relative to what you're willing to pay on a bill and how volatile that bill may be. Right? Because everybody's different. My wife, when we had our daughter, when she was just a newborn, my wife said, I don't really care what the cost is. I'm going to, I'm going to run it this way, and a lot of bad language. And I learned not to mess with my wife. And, that's the sort of thing that varies, right? Because now I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, what do you think? She's like, whatever. Times, they change, right? Consumers' preferences change. And so much of, like I said earlier, our infrastructure is designed to do one thing for everybody all the same way. That is exactly the wrong thing to do. It's what we had to do because the way the technology worked, and it was analog, and had to have a human in the loop. Okay, but the technology is enabling me to customize the thing for you, and you're different than everybody else. And so what we're trying to do with analytics, and I think it's where OPower, I know it's certainly where Google and other companies are trying to evolve, is just get away from the, let me come over to your house and persecute you with how bad you are and how awesome your neighbor is. And instead focus on you. What do you like? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And think about that and how we can deliver an energy experience that meets those needs. And that, I think, is where a lot of the analytics is going to.
Amir Mimic with the LCRA here locally in Austin as well. I'm in the asset management group for our organization, and we're doing something fairly similar to you guys as far as the business intelligence and analytics portion, where we're trying to figure out how to take these massive amounts of data and turn it into relevant information. What I'm interested in, I guess, hearing from you, if you could elaborate a little bit on, is are you guys taking field information from data concentrators from different devices, like on your transformers, and then trying to pull that back in for implementing like condition-based maintenance? And on top of that, are you guys using off-the-shelf software for business intelligence, for business reporting on the financials and rate cases and everything else on top of that? So it's two aspects: one, maintenance; two, business intelligence for reporting.
Right. So business intelligence, that's an easy one. I love the business intelligence question because how about the answer to the following statement is yes to everything, which is we have, fill in the blank, BI tool, right? Do we have Tableau? Yes. Crystal reports? Yes. We have them all, right? And we're doing tons of reporting. We do a bunch of it. And like I said, it's like we're walking forwards, but we're looking backwards, right? And a lot of that, I said, well, look, guys, you're going to hit the speed bump and fall over if that's all you do. So we do that. We do it very well. As we started to do our analytics piece, we said, hey, by the way, where did that data come from that's in that report that you're using? And you know what the answer we got was? Most people didn't have a clue. No, pretty much no one had a clue. And so what we had to go back to is like, oh, okay, we have really got to go back and think about our data infrastructure, our data dictionary, all the kind of basic blocking and tackling that one needs to do to be able to figure out just what the analytics need to be. I mean, we had done all sorts of great pseudocode, and we'd come up with all sorts of great ways to do it, and then probably realized we didn't have crap. And we had to go back and rethink all of that. In terms of what we're doing, though, is one of the key things that all of this triggered for us was realizing that we didn't have the right sensors, we didn't have the right data, or perhaps it was analog data, it was manually kept, or it was kept in a spreadsheet or an Excel. It was kept somewhere. And what it did was it created the world's longest set of work for IT to go deliver. And the CIO told me he was going to throttle me if I added one more item to the list. To which I said, hey, just think of me as like your ultimate sales guy. I'm giving you so much work that you ought to be the happiest guy around. And so what it does is it creates this cycle. We do some analytics. We realize where we have gaps. it triggers a bunch of IT projects where we have to go back and find other ways to either get new data, to augment it with something else, to put in new sensors or whatever, and then which creates a new algorithm, new analytics, and kind of wash, rinse, repeat, and do it again. We're on our first cycle. We're about at spend. We haven't wrung all the water out yet. We're getting close. But, you know, as I think of it, and I keep telling our CEO this, I said, don't think of it as I've done it and then I'm done, right? Analytics is not a destination. I said, this is permanent. It's forever. And we will do this cycle again and again and again. Do we have it right? Absolutely not. Have we done stuff wrong? Oh yeah. I got a long list of things we did wrong. Are we changing? Significantly. And that's really the thing I measure. It isn't so much that, oh, you know, tool XYZ blew up and nobody here knows how to code in R or Python and I got to go find somebody. It's really more, wow, they actually know what that stuff is used for. And wow, we found, you know, 15 data quality issues that were really killing us and we just didn't know it. And we were just blindly going on with it. That's really the measure of success. I mean, we have ROIs and things, but that's really the measure of success.
Hi, Chris Orena, also from LCRA. I had a question. Other than the rebate, did anything fundamentally change with the rate structure as a whole? And also, I'm in the transmission planning group, so I'm, you know, kind of more focused on, you know, kind of that fixed, you know, cost that you talk about. Absent anything like something on the ancillary market or something where you're able to capture that, you know, wholesale cost savings, are you in trouble if, you know, that doesn't come to fruition, I guess? Yeah.
Right. So here's when we looked at the solar problem, the first thing we noticed was that the net metering concept itself cannot be touched. As a matter of fact, if you really would, you know, you're thinking that you've been on this earth for too long and you'd like to meet your heavenly maker, one great way to do it is to go to your regulator and say, I'm going to kill net metering, right? Let's kill it. You will find that your tenure is short-lived. So we realized we could not do that. We did not change our rate structures at all. Our rates remain entirely the way they were. What happened was, and what the challenge was to the team was, go find a better product that is better than what they've got today. And they said, you can't do that, man. We're giving them a huge incentive. It's like a third off. And then we give them, you know, net metering. Like, there's no better offer. Customers have no issues with that, right? And it took looking at the data, digging into it to find it. In terms of, for us, in terms of cost recovery, you know, I was having this great debate with our CFO about this issue. And she was going on about, you know, we got to make sure we get our fixed cost recovery and we're going to make all our money back on this program and everything else. And we basically take that cost for the purchase power agreement and we spread it across in fuel. But I said, well, look, let's take it as an either or scenario, right? I can either do this program or I can let customers do the traditional program. In the traditional program, your fixed cost recovery goes to zero. And you pay them a lot of money over your variable cost too. Versus this program where I get all my fixed cost recovery and I pay for the system too. Becomes an asset, which was better for you. And that became like a 5-minute debate with the CFO and we were done. I had the similar discussion with the city, who is not only our owner but also our regulator, and said, okay, here's how it works. And they said, yeah, what are you waiting here for? Go. You know, to me, that's the kind of the trick here, is to figure out how to make it work financially as much for you as it works operationally and for the customer. We think we've hit something. There will be snafus, I give you that. There will always be something that goes wrong. But I think this is a great way to basically capture value for everybody and keep us whole financially.
Jason Sears from Green Mountain Energy. I love the idea of solar hosts, and it makes a lot of sense for those individuals who are not in the game of acquiring solar.
Sure.
My question is, though, you're essentially paying them $3, what is it, or 3 cents per 3 cents per kilowatt hour. If I were to acquire solar in San Antonio, the value per kilowatt hour is the cost avoidance on what I'm not paying CPS. I don't know what that is, but let's just say that's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Does it make sense for those who can acquire their own solar to do so? And if the answer is no today, at what point does the cost of acquiring solar per kilowatt reach that point where I want to buy it if I can.
Right, and so that's how we are differentiating if you think about the market segmentation, let's just divide it into, of all the folks who are, people who can, whose roofs are fine, they can all host it. That really gets divided into two groups, roughly speaking. Those who can absolutely afford it and those who can't, which is really 2% of the population and 98%. For the 98%, it's all about the money, it's free, it's great, you know, la-di-da, they're done. For the 2% who can afford it, and that's why I cited Senator Phil Gramm. He's like, I can pay $46,000, let's do it. And I'll never forget, by the way, if you've ever had to debate two PhD economists who have the notoriety of Phil and Wendy Graham, I highly recommend it, but more like being on candid camera. We're like, really? I'm doing this? Really? So I had that debate. And it was fun to see Phil and Wendy crack out their Excel spreadsheets and start making them themselves and going, I want to own this damn thing. And they were going on and on about owning it and look how big the credit is. And I said, yeah, you going to get up on that ladder and maintain that stuff? You going to pay somebody to do that? Oh, who are you going to pay? I don't know. I'm like, you going to replace the inverter? You have to replace the inverter? Yeah, you got to wash it, and you got to check the wiring. What happens if you get a roof penetration and it leaks? What? What happens if a hailstorm comes in? I gotta call somebody for that? Yeah, it may not be insured. So what we do for the 2% is we market it on convenience. Don't have to pay, yeah, that's great. But, hey, I take care of the maintenance for you. I replace that inverter. I'll take it down when you have to have your roof done. I'll take care of all the hassle. So yeah, you can afford it, but I can help you avoid the hassle. And so you've got that kind of flexibility. Well, what's the bigger value driver? I think that's where we're seeing the market play is convenience more of a value play than owning? I don't know about you. How many people in here lease your car? Okay, well, I own my car, and I like to own it. And the only reason why I would go and switch to something else is if I didn't have to, if there was this magical thing where I don't have to, and I don't own a BMW, but if I didn't have to, maintain the damn thing, people just magically showed up and took care of it for me and brought it back, and it was perfect, and it was clean, and it was there, that would be worth something. And that's what we've tried to do here in that value proposition, and how we market it to that 2% is all on convenience. And that's how we've tried to differentiate it, because we've already won the 98%. 98% of people can't afford it. We can help you do that, and you don't have to pay anything. There's no secret lease or a hidden balloon payment or none of that magical stuff. It's ours. It's done. 2% though, they can absolutely afford it. They want to afford it. They like owning it. Those folks, it's all about convenience.
So one more.
So much. I think you're out of time. We have to talk.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.